Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on Episode 4 of Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro, Second Attack. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So I guess we're just sort of, flashing forward briefly from Nagatoro's sister's perspective. You know, it looked like she was picking up some pudding, and now there's this dopey-looking guy sort of ringing the doorbell and opening the gate. Obviously, if this isn't suspicious, this is certainly an opportunity for her to bully somebody with a reasonable amount of impunity. And you know, I think considering that she goes, right to bullying, it speaks pretty clearly that she's not worried about, any actual criminal activity going on here. You know, I feel a little bad for Senpai. He probably doesn't quite deserve something like this. I mean, I get there's a gate and all that, but if nobody's answering the intercom or whatever out there, the next step is to go knock on the door or something, so I feel bad for the guy a little bit, but I guess if he's willing to sort of interact with Nagatoro and, her relatives, I guess, then this is probably par for the course. I'd imagine that if Nagatoro's sister's like this, then her whole family's probably like this, too. So, at this point, I believe it's kind of been established that Nagatoro, she's sick, but she's not feeling poorly, So it seems like when Senpai stopped around here, he just sort of caught her at a bad time when she was napping or something. Unfortunately, the fact that Nagatoro is not around to intercede, I feel like her big sister is going to tease Senpai much more ruthlessly, seeing as how she doesn't really have much of a rapport with him. I'm wondering if this is sort of like a big fish in a small pond kind of situation here. Nagatoro is one thing, but her sister's a whole nother level. And I guess by virtue of having a common enemy, Senpai and Nagatoro put aside their differences for the time being. That would be an interesting dynamic, since it seems as though Nagatoro's sister is as intent on teasing Senpai as she is on sort of teasing her sister by doing that stereotypical routine of here's a bunch of embarrassing information about her. I mean, Senpai's not really interested in any of that stuff. And considering how he's sort of having a flashback, it would seem as though he's probably being sincere to a point. You know, he normally doesn't care about people or have any interest in them, but seeing as how Nagatoro makes up a significant portion of his portfolio at this point, I'd say, she's something of a special case. And I'd imagine Nagatoro's sister is, imminently aware of this. I mean, even when he sort of, like, non-committally answers, she has to tease him. Oh dear. So, here we have it, you know, Nagatoro's in rare form. You know, normally whenever we see her, she's in... I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily call it pristine condition, but, you know, she wouldn't be so disheveled had she known Senpai was around. So, you know, there we have it. Senpai is wrong-footed, as is Nagatoro, but her sister is calm and collected, and she seems to really be enjoying this. Yeah, you know, I feel like Senpai's just sort of picking up on maybe something he should have latched onto early on, that, you know, this is not a safe situation. Fortunately, though, Nagatoro is now back, and she seems kind of subdued. So I feel like, if nothing else, she's not going to tease Senpai too much, you know. They have a common enemy, there's more to worry about here. So it would seem as though the gift Senpai brought was rather fortuitous in that, you know, it was pudding like her sister brought, but, you know, nicer or fancier. So I'm wondering, you know, if Nagatoro's sister's sort of going out of her way to be embarrassing by, you know, making this, what does she call it, like pudding a la mode with a bunch of fruit and whipped cream and stuff. I mean, she made one for Senpai, too. So I guess it makes sense that her idea here is to sort of lure them with food so she can tease them both. So Nagatoro's made perhaps the sensible choice of saying, you know, we're going to be eating in my room. You're not allowed. On the one hand, you know, this sort of cuts Nagatoro's sister out of proceedings, but on the other hand, I feel like it's setting up room for other shenanigans. You know, I can all too easily imagine that for one reason or another they find themselves in a bit of a compromising position, only just in time for the door to swing open. You know, wouldn't that just be typical? And, you know, a nice little bit of fodder for them to be teased about relentlessly. So now that they are alone, you know, things are still a little bit stilted, but, you know, Nagatoro's not immediately devolving into teasing him as she usually would. She's actually sort of sincere and thankful that he would sort of drop by to check on her. I mean, yeah, he sort of had to drop off homework and schoolwork as well, but I think it's pretty clear that that was merely a secondary reason. You know, he was going to check on her regardless, and given that Nagatoro's friends saw he was already going, they figured, oh, well, you can drop this off as well. So it looks like Nagatoro's back to her old tricks, you know, with the absence of a common enemy. I guess it's only natural that Nagatoro would start to tease him, say like, come on, open up, here comes the airplane, have a little pudding. I mean, that's not particularly embarrassing. I think the right approach here would be to, just double down, don't let it get to you. Unfortunately, Senpai's not that kind of guy. Ah, there we have it. Yep, just like that, Nagatoro's sister barges in immediately. I think it's pretty clear she's doing it to just needle them. It's not like she opened the door slowly. She barged right in. Darn near kicked the door off its hinges. And her excuse was like, oh, I brought you some juice. I mean, it's nice to have the plausible deniability, but I think it's pretty clear that she's just sort of here to tease the both of them. So that really is like a double-edged threat right there, because on the one hand, she's like, hey senpai, we can talk about all this embarrassing stuff about my sister later, since you're so interested. So it's sort of, it's rather masterful how she just dunks on both of them. It's like, hey Nagatoro, I'm gonna tell senpai all this embarrassing stuff. And, senpai, you're awfully interested in this stuff, aren't you? Isn't that interesting? And you know what? Like, shame on senpai, he did sort of admit to being interested. I mean, I don't think it's wrong for him to have done so, but when it's Nagatoro's sister who's asking, I mean, your first interaction with her was to sort of, like, have her, like, pretend to rat you out to the police, I think that sort of breeds distrust, if nothing else. So this is something we haven't seen in quite a while. Nagatoro and Senpai are going to play that fighting game they had done before. And back then it was interesting because this was sort of an area where Senpai excelled and he was able to sort of fight back on more or less even terms. But that Nagatoro's bringing this up seems to indicate to me that maybe she's been practicing, I guess in hopes that she'll win. I mean, initially, this does indeed seem that it's the case. Alright, so even though Nagatoro's faring better than she normally would, I feel like she's sort of bringing up this line of inquiry deliberately to sort of throw him off his balance. Yeah, well, it seems to be working at the very least. And, I'm not entirely sure why. Senpai doesn't have a whole lot to be guilty about. I guess he does sort of feel a little guilty about sort of prying into Nagatoro's past behind her back, but like, I don't know, nothing really came of it. And even if something did, I feel like that could sort of be excused by her sister just kind of being a jerk. So interestingly, it seems like Nagatoro has taken the upper hand here. Alright, now this is an interesting expression here. I feel like Nagatoro's sort of, I don't know, like protesting a bit too much maybe? Like she's saying, if you win, I will tell you a secret since you're so interested. But it seems almost self-serving to me, as if this is something she wants to do, but she can't really reconcile that want with her persona, if that makes any sense. You know, how can she continue to tease him with impunity if she's the one showing sincerity in developing a further relationship, if that makes any sense. So naturally, she's going to leverage this, you know. What kind of secret do you want to know, senpai? And he's sort of dodging around the question. And while indeed he might not have anything in mind, this evasiveness sort of gives Nagatoro room to suggest, you know, okay, you want to know a couple measurements, alright then, I see what you're getting at, senpai. And she seems to imply that there might be something even more intimate than measurements. You know, I don't know what she could possibly be implying here, but, you know, it seems to be riling up senpai. And so I guess he just sort of blurts it out, you know, I want to know your first name. And I think it's one of those cultural things where it's a lot more meaningful over there than it is here, where, you know, you don't just call people by their first name, and that senpai doesn't even know her first name, I guess, is somewhat notable. You know, it seems that the implication behind him wanting to know her name is that he harbors some sort of romantic interest. And, you know, that might be fair, but Nagatoro's also sort of dancing around that issue, I think. Which I guess kind of indicates maybe I'm a bit wrong here about my interpretation. So Nagatoro was so busy sort of needling senpai about this that she sort of lost by virtue of the time limit running out. So, you know, a victory is a victory. She has to tell him her name. Alright. So this is interesting. You know, I think this does imply more romantic feelings. You know, senpai doesn't want to know by virtue of this. He wants to, you know, ask her under more natural circumstances. So it seems to me that there is sort of like little itty bitty romantic attraction here. Now, I guess good on senpai, you know, he's displaying like a couple vertebrae worth of a spine here, saying that, you know, if I want to know your name, I'll ask you properly. And, I mean, that's something, you know, baby steps, senpai. You gotta crawl before you can walk. So, just to, oh dear, just to ruin everything, Nagatoro's sister barges in saying, you know, hey, Hayase-chan, addressing her by her first name, and bringing a photo album with childhood photos. No good ever comes of that, but, you know, she sort of swiftly punctured the mood, revealed Nagatoro's name, and proceeded to embarrass all involved. Really is a masterful stroke of bullying. So I guess that's it then, you know. It was a reasonably good day for the pair of them, Nagatoro's sister notwithstanding. And I guess just to sort of reinforce the good mood, Nagatoro reminds him that, you know, hey, starting tomorrow, I'll be picking on you again. And he just sort of, he doesn't really shrug it off, but he's like, you know, yeah, okay. Like, he takes it sort of good-naturedly. So I guess just to sort of bring things back to the status quo, we have to have Senpai in the art room doing his thing while Nagatoro comes in to distract or otherwise tease him. I guess the good news is she's feeling better, so, she can just pick on him as she normally would. And it seems like her vector of attack is that, Senpai hasn't had to draw like a teenage girl in a while, so I guess I can model for you. So naturally, things are going to get interesting in that she has to pick whatever sort of pose would make him as uncomfortable as possible. It's interesting that this is her approach, considering yesterday. I guess it makes sense that she really wants to get in her teasing quota, seeing as how she was something of a victim previously. So this is actually interesting. She's striking a martial arts pose, a kick, and she's holding that while Senpai draws her, and I'd imagine with your leg fully extended like that, that's gotta get uncomfortable pretty quickly, I'd imagine. And I guess that is in fact the case, So it seems like Nagataro's in this awful position where, she's cramping up, so she can't really hold the pose, but she can't sort of safely get out of it either. Good on Senpai, I guess, for sort of diving to break her fall. So it's interesting that, he sort of did something nice for her, and she's just sort of like, oh, you rascal, you, trying to get a little feel in. I don't think that's a fair criticism necessarily. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.